previous false bids, prohibits major disruptions by bidders and prohibits bidders attempting to prevent others from bidding and provides for fines for such conduct. The rules permit for vendor bids. The words I'll use during the auction to indicate that I'm making a bid on behalf of the vendor are vendor bid, and by law only I, as the auctioneer, can make a vendor bid. The contract of sale has been on display prior to today's auction. We call for 10% deposit upon the fall of the hammer and the signing of the contract to take place here today, with the balance to be paid at settlement in 30 to 60 days time, at which time the vendor will provide the lucky buyer with vacant possession of the property. All in all, it's quite a straightforward contract. Everything's in there, everything's quite clear. So buyers, this is my highest recommendation, what we offer for your consideration and competition here today. Build your dream. It's your blank canvas. The only limitation is your imagination. An ideal place, an ideal block of over 600 square metres to build your family's dream home on here in Telopea Crescent, where we've got access to a wonderful array of infrastructure, parkland, as close as across the road, and walking distance to absolutely everything that you need for a great family lifestyle. Not far away at all from multiple transport routes, including bus, train and tram. 86 on Plenty Road. Easy access, of course, to a plethora of shopping. Not far away at all from Westfield, Plenty Valley, and of course University Hill shopping, and great options when it comes to schooling, not only primary and secondary but also tertiary education. And if you have a whiz around Telopea Crescent, what you will notice is very well manicured and well looked after homes, and very few for sale boards, because once you move in to Telopea Crescent, you tend to stay and build your family, build your life and create your memories. And today is the first of many memories, getting the sold sticker up on the board. So if that's what you're here for, now is your time. I apologise we kept you waiting, but now is the time, buyers, to secure your dream. Where can I see a fair and reasonable starting bid for 17 Telopea? Who'd like to start us off? I don't mind the call. I'm in your hands, buyers. Start me off. It's all right, you can keep me waiting now, that's fine, I deserve it, I don't mind. I'll just have to cop it, I understand, guys. But it is an opportunity for you to start from a position of strength, to mark your territory, to look every other buyer in the eye and say, usually I would say the keys belong to me, but unfortunately we don't have keys in play here today. We do have a title of a premier block here in a premier estate, and a premier opportunity for you and your family to take advantage of. At 700,000, welcome soon, best of luck at 700. At 700,000, fairly been offered now at 700. At 700,000, fairly been offered, the bid's here at 7. At 700,000, there's the competition, the opportunities with you all now. At $700,000 I have. At $700,000, fairly been offered now at 7. First call, at 700,000 are we done? At $700,000 for the second call, at 700,000 are we done? At 710, I'll short my stride at 710 now, 710,000. I was hoping for a bigger bid, but makes it easy for you now at 720 now. At 720,000, 3 unit now at 720,000. At 720 the bid. At 720,000, fairly been offered. One bid not enough for you here today, sir. At 720,000. At 720 the bid. Was that 30? At 730 now. At 730,000 in the centre at 30. At 730,000, fairly been offered now at 730. At 730 and 40 got. At 740 the bid now. At 740,000, one bid not enough here either. Make it 50 in the rise. At 740 the bid. At 740,000 once. At 740 are we done? At 740,000, second call at 740 the bid. At 50 now, 750,000, 60 it's got to be at 750. At 750 in the centre. At 750, was that 60, Jim? I've got 60 here, I'll go with 60 at 760 now. At 760, at 760,000, make it 70, sir. At 760,000, fairly been offered now at 760 the bid. At 760, got on the phone with Ange. At 760,000. At 65 now, short of my stride, and get you back involved at 65. And same courtesy to your buyer, Andrew, and here at 65. At 770 now, at 770,000. At 770,000, going to show strength in the bidding, sir, if you want to buy. At 780, at $780,000 the bid now. At 780 the bid's there. At 780 the bid. At 780,000, fairly been offered now. Bid there, opportunity everywhere else. At 785 now. At 785,000. At 785 the bid. At 785,000, bid here. At 90 got. At 790,000, you got them down to $5,000 bids. Take me to 8. At 790,000 and the bid's there. At 790 the bid for the first call. At 95 now. 795. At 795,000. Con, do we sell here today at 800,000 now? We sell here today at 800,000. Make absolutely no mistake about it. The bid's there. The keys are there. 810. Wait until we're on the market, sir. Great strategy at 810 and 20 now, at 820,000, at 830 now, at 830,000, fairly been offered, at 830 the bid. We're up and away now. We sell at 830,000, fairly been offered, at 830 the bid, at 40 now, at 840,000 the bid now, at 840,000, fairly been offered, sir. We're done here at 45. At 41, at 841. We done here, sir? Definitely done. Thank you for your bidding. At 841, I have back there. 45. At 45. At 845, we done there, Jim. At 845,000. 50. At 50. At 850, the bid. At 850,000. Nice, strong bidding. Got to dig deep if you want to buy. Bid big if you want to buy. Be bold if you want to buy. 850, the bid. Once at 850, all done. At 55, at 855 now, at 855,000, at 855, at 57 now, at 857, at 857, at 60 now, at 860, at 860,000, fairly been offered now, 860 the bid, at 860,000 bid here. So you came out strong once we were on the market, but you got to finish strong if you want to buy at 61, at 861,000 now, at 861 got there, at 65, at 865 the bid, at 865,000 fairly been offered now at 865, at 865,000 and the bid's there at 865, at 865,000 bid there, opportunity with you all at 865 once, at 865 all done. At 860, at 67, I had it here first, Bale, at 867,000, at 867,000, how about 70 or 70 on the phone? At 867 in the bids here, at 867,000, at 69 now, at 869, at 70, 870,000 fairly been offered, at 870 the bid, at 870,000 now, at 870 bid there, opportunity with you both, and on this side, at 870 once, at 870 all done. At 71 now, welcome back at 71, at 871 the bid, at 871,000, fairly been offered now at 871, at 871 the bid here, at 75 was that, at 875 and a great bid again, at 875,000, at 875,000, got to dig deep if you want to buy, at 875 the bids there, 8 3/4 once, at 875 all done. At 77, at 877 now, and 80 beckons surely. At 877, at 877,000, fairly been offered now at 877 the bid. At 80 now, at 880,000 got. At 880,000, are we done over here? At 880,000, you're not done. At 880,000, now's the time to let me know. At 880,000, at 880,000. It did take it at 81 now, at 881,000. Let me know if you're still in. It took me a while to arrive, but I'll leave quickly, I promise you. At 881, at 881,000. 885 the bid, at $885,000 now, at 885. 7 now at 887, at 887,000, at 887,000 bid there now at 887, at 887,000 looks like there's 3 still in it, at $887,000 the bid, once at 887 done. At 89, at 900, at 900,000, even money at that at 9, at 900,000 was a great bid, sir, but outdone by 9. At 800, at $900,000, even money at 901, at 901,000, at 901,000, at 901 now fairly been offered. Don't let it scare you off. It's not that much more than 899. At 905, at $905,000 the bid at 905. You're still in it, sir. At 905,000 fairly been offered. At 905. We are on the market. We sell. If you've come to buy, bid me now or forever hold your peace. At 905,000, we sell away once at 905. All done. 10. At 910 now, 910,000. Back in with style at 10. At $910,000 the bid. At $910,000 fairly been offered at 911. At 911. 911, it's an emergency, you're going to miss out. At 911,000 at 15 now. At 915,000, fairly been offered now at 915 the bid. At 915,000. At 915 bid back there, how about 20, sir? At 915,000, fairly been offered now. At 915,000 bid there. Rights there. At 9. 919 at 919,000. At 919,000, easy leap to 20 at 919,000. Do you want to get there first, sir, ma'am? At 919, can I say 20 now? At 919 at 20 done. At 920,000, fairly been offered now at 920 the bid. At 920,000, the bid's back here at 920. At 920,000, bid there, sold sticker there. At 920 the bid. At 920,000, can I say 25,000 now, sir? Take me to a quarter. At 920 the bid. At 920,000 once. At 920 all done.
25.
At 25, welcome back at 25. At 925,000. At 925,000 and the bids here at 925. At 925,000, fairly been offered now at $925,000 the bid for the first call at 925. Done. Second call at 27 at 927 now. At 27 and a half, at 927 and a half, at 927,528, at 900, at 30 now, welcome back, sir, ma'am, at 930,000, at 930,000, at 930,000, fairly been offered, bids with you, sold sticker with you at 30, at 935 now, at 935,000, at 935,000, bid back here, sold sticker back here at 935, at 935,000, against your bid, sir, at 935, can I say 40 now, at 935,000, the bid's behind. At 935,000, I'll bring the show to you. At 935, at 935,000, bid there, what do you say? 35, against you. At 935,000, once. At 935, all done. At 40 now, 940,000. Sorry, sir, I've got to go where the money is. At 940, at 940,000, at 940,000, fairly been offered. At 940 in the bids here. At 940, about to miss out there, Ange on the phone. At 940,000, at 940,000, have they reached their limit? At 940 the bid. The bid here, the sold sticker here, we sell 940 the bid. Once at 940,000, all done.
42.
At 42 now. At 942. At 942 the bid. At 942,000 against your bid at 43 now. At 943. At 943,000. At 943 and 45. At 945 the quick retort at 45. At 945,000 bid back here on the phone. Back against you the opportunity. At 945,000 fairly been offered now at 945. Are we still in it? 946 at 946,000. Are we done here at 46? Still thinking about it? At 946,000, fairly been offered now at 946 the bid. At 946,000, bid there, sold sticker there, on the market, selling at 946. Once at 946,000, all done.
One more.
At 947. At 947, he's lost count. At 947,000. At 947. At 47 and a half. At 947,500. At 947,500, fairly been offered now. At 947 and 48 now. At 948. At 948,000. Got to be 50 surely, sir. At 948, 51. At 951,000. I undersold your bid. At 951. At 951,000. The bid's back there at 51. At 951,000, are they definitely done? At 951 the bid. At 951,000, I'll circle back here if you've got a moment to think about it. At 951,000, I'm coming back to you, sir. At 951, are we done? Definitely done. Thank you very much for your spirited bidding here today. At $951,000 the bid. First call at 951. Bids here. Sold sticker here. Second call at 951 the bid. Done. Finished. Third. At 951 and a half, and welcome back at 951 and a half. Might be just in time at 951 and a half. We're definitely done over there, sir. The original bidder definitely done, thank you. At 951 and a half. At 951 and a half, he's off the phone, that's good news. Only one more to beat. At 951,500, bid here, sold sticker here. At 951 and a half. So if you tell me you're out, I will sell. Need clear instructions now. At 900. At 52, at 952, now he's been bidding so strong the whole time. You've got him down to $500 bids, and always the best response to a small bid is always a big bid. At 900, respond with strength. At 952, bids there, sold stickers there, we're on the market, we sell, we play for keeps. I'll ask you this, if you miss out today, when's the next block available on Telopea? At 952,000. Probably won't be in this position again at 52.5. At 952,555. At 955 the bid. At 955,000. At 955,000 fairly been offered now at 955 bids there. Sold stick again there at 955. We sell once at 955. Done. Second call at 955,000 at 56 at 950. You keep surprising me at 956 and 57 now. At 957,000. At 957,000 now. If it's worth 57, it's worth 60. At 957,000, fairly been offered now. At 957 and the bid's there. At 957,000, fairly been offered. We sell here today. 957 the bid. First call at 957,000 done. Is that yes to 60? I thought you were taking my suggestion. Second call at $957,000 the bid. Done, finished. Third, final call, 957 the bid. All done, all finished. Silent out at 57. Out over here, we're definitely done, sir, at 957,000. Andrew off the phone. If you tell me that I've got your absolute best here today, I will sell over here. Have we reached the end of the road? Check your pockets, dig a bit deeper. Definitely done?
58.
At 58 now, and welcome back at 58. Make it 60, sir. At 958,000. At 958,000, fairly behind 59 now at 959. At 959 now, 60 might be the hard limit of the competition. If it is, you want to get there first at 59. At 959,000, the bid's back there. The sold sticker back there. The opportunity with you now. At 959,000, once at 959, all done. At 60 now, 960,000, and we got there in the end at 61. At 900, well, 61 might be the hard limit, we don't know. At 961,000, fairly been offered and bid here now at 961 the bid. At 961,000, we are selling, playing for keeps at 961. First call at 961, all done. Second call at 961, done, finished. Third, final call. $961,000 the bid, all done, all finished, all silent and out there. Tell me one more time you're out and I'll sell you. We definitely done. I'll have your absolute best here today.
62.
At 62 now. At 962,000. At 962,000 now. At 63. At 963 the bid. At 963,000. Fairly been offered. Bid back there. My right, your left against you at 63. At 963,000. Fairly been offered now. At 963,000 and we sell. If there's no better bid, we sell at that. At 963 the bid. Once at 963,000 all done. Twice. At 963 the bid, done, finished. Third, final call, 963, all done, all finished, all silent and out at 963. Are we definitely done? You've told me that once or twice before though. We're definitely done now though. Look, when the eyes say we're done. You sure? I think that you got 64 in you. You're absolutely sure? Thank you very much for your spirited bidding here today. At 963,000, bids there, keys there. We sell once, twice, third, final call at 963, the bid all done, all finished, silent out. Are you absolutely sure? I can't entice you back in with even half. We are selling, 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 sold. Congratulations and well bid. Join me congratulating our new owners and our vendors. You've just witnessed another successful Harcourts Rata & Co auction. Have a great weekend. See you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Good luck next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well bid. Congratulations. Well done.
Thank you.
It's a great spot. Built a beautiful home. Have you got some plans in mind?
Few.
Yeah? Yeah. Well, it's blank canvas, so
Yeah.
you can do what you like with it.
Yeah.
Congratulations.